So I am going to make some homemade yogurt, and I'm going to make it in my Instant Pot pressure cooker. I made half a batch 2, maybe 3 weeks ago at the most, and it turned out so awesome that I was hoping that wishing that I had made a full batch. So I'm going to make a full batch, use a whole gallon of milk today, and make a full batch. And all you need is milk and a gallon of milk and 2 tablespoons of yogurt. You need some yogurt to start with, 2 tablespoons, and I'm going to use the last 2 tablespoons of what I made previously. If you're new to the Instant Pot, it's a pressure cooker, and the more I use it, the more I like it. It's got a stainless steel liner that comes out, washes up easily, and then the heater core, and then the lid, and it's got a rubber ring down in there that I've got to get set down in there, and I'll get everything set up and then we'll start on our yogurt. It takes a while to make, so it's got to incubate for 8 hours once you get it up to temp, so we'll get started. So you want to add your milk to a cold pot. You don't want to heat it. And this isn't going to be done under pressure, so if you have a glass lid for your Instant Pot, you can use that. Or I don't have a glass lid, so I'm just going to use my regular lid. You have to make sure that your rubber ring is really well seated down in there, or your lid will not close. And we'll see if I can get this on. I'm going to... And you have that on, and we're going to push the yogurt button. There it is. And we're going to adjust it, to boil. And it'll take a minute or so, and you'll hear it start. It'll bring it up to boil. Every few minutes you want to whisk this. You want to get it up to 180 degrees. And actually, it's better if you can get it to between 183 and 185. And we will whisk it every once in a while. You need a thermometer. I've got a candy thermometer, and that'll work just fine. A lot of people have the instant digital thermometers, and I don't have one of those yet, but for now this works just great, and we'll use that in a bit. So it'll start to preheat, and as I said, it's going to take a little bit to get there. So it will beep when it reaches what it says is the boiling point, but that's when you want to whisk it and then check the temperature after you whisk it. And I'll see you in a few. So it's been about 10 minutes. I'm just going to take the lid off and whisk it. And it makes that noise every time you open and close the lid. And as I said, you just want to take and whisk it. Helps the milk to heat more evenly. And keeps the milk from sticking to the bottom, which I didn't have any problem with that the last time. But the pot's actually just kind of getting warm, so we're going to let it go. So this is my leftover yogurt smoothie from yesterday. It was a banana, couple tablespoons of yogurt was all I had left, a few chia seeds, about a teaspoon of raw sugar, a handful of blueberries, and a handful of raspberries that were frozen. And I just blenderized that all up with my stick blender. It's a little thick. I may thin it just a little bit more after sitting overnight. I made enough that I had enough for 2 days. Very tasty and very good for you. Normally, if I have to sweeten it, if the berries aren't quite sweet enough, I usually add just a tiny bit of honey. But yesterday, the raw sugar was handy, so I used that. But I'll drink this up. That's going to be part of my breakfast and late breakfast. Tastes good, gives you energy, good for you. What more could you ask for? That's one way to use the yogurt. So it's been about a half hour, maybe just a little over, and we're up to almost 160 degrees. So this isn't a quick process. It takes a few minutes. So we'll keep watching. I just about every 8 to 10 minutes. I stir it well. You want to really stir it good before you try to check the temperature. That way make sure everything's mixed in. You don't have any hot spots or cold spots. But it's getting there. You may have to hit the boil even a couple of times. Last time I did it, I had to hit saute for a few minutes to totally get it up to temp. So it beeped that it was up to the boil. I stirred it really well with the whisk, and I've got my thermometer in there seeing what we're up to temp. I doubt it's where I want it yet. It took me a couple times the last time. I don't know if you can see it or not. It's only showing 160. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the, you can do the yogurt cycle again and boil. I'm going to hit the saute. That's what I did the last time. And that will hopefully get it up to temp a little quicker. But we'll leave the thermometer in there and see what we're up to here. While you have this on the saute function, you really want to whisk it frequently because it will scorch pretty easily. So it's every minute or two I'm whisking. The temperature was last up to not quite 180, but it's climbing. It won't be long. So we've hit almost 185. It's been a total of, I would say, I didn't look to see what time we started, probably close to an hour, 55 minutes or so. So I've got the pot turned off, and now what we need to do is cool this down. You're going to fill the sink with some cold water, set this in it, and cool it down between 95 and 100 degrees. You're going to have to whisk it every few minutes and till we get it down to. So I've got my pot in the sink, the plug's in, and it's filling with cold water. And as I said, you just want to whisk at least every couple of minutes. Probably reach a point where the water starts to warm up, where you're going to drain it and refill it with cold all over again. So I'll get this about halfway up the pot. You don't want the pot to float. And just keep whisking. And I'll get my thermometer in there shortly. As I said, down to 95 to 100 is where we went. And then we'll temper some of it into my starter, and then we'll let it has to incubate for 8 hours. See you. So it's only been a few minutes and the water in the sink was already warm, so I drained it and I'm refilling it with cold water. We were down to, when I just checked them in, they go down to about 140, so we're getting there slowly. It's coming. This is my leftover yogurt. I don't know how well you can see it here. It's thick because I strained it, but that's what I'm going to use for my starter in this. If you're using store-bought yogurt, make sure that it has active cultures, because if it doesn't have active live cultures, it won't work. So this is cooling. Just keep whisking and it'll keep dropping. So we're down to just below 120 at the moment. We'll just keep an eye on it, keep stirring. My water's getting warm again, but I think it's still cold enough that it'll get it down to temp. We'll check it again in a couple of minutes. What you're going to do is you're going to take a cup of that milk when it's down to temp and add it to your starter slowly. You want to make sure it's down to temp. If it's too hot, it'll kill your starter. But what we want to do is temper the starter with that, and then we'll add it back. So I'm down to just below 100 degrees. What I did was I added a couple of tablespoons to my starter, and then I added a little more to get it thinned out, and I'm going to dump that in. We'll stir that in. It goes back into the pot. So I used about a cup of the warm milk to temper my starter, and I stirred that up good. Add it back into the pot of milk and mix that in very well. Put the pot back in. We're going to put the lid on. As I said, you don't need the lid, it's not pressure, but you want to hit the yogurt button and the adjust, and you want to hit that till it's says 8 hours. Hours, minutes, seconds. So that needs to incubate for 8 hours, and it counts up instead of down, which I don't understand, but anyway, it'll start to count up here shortly. Once it's incubated for 8 hours, it goes in the fridge for overnight. If you want the directions for this, send me a message, or I got the recipe off from, it's called This Old Gal. She has a pressure cooking blog, and it's her Greek yogurt, pressure cooker Greek yogurt recipe that I use that works wonderful. She also has a Facebook page for the Instant Pot. So we'll see you when this, well, I probably won't see you when this is all done. So what I'll do is when this is done, it'll go in the fridge. It'll be done this evening. It'll go in the fridge overnight to chill. Tomorrow I'll put it in a strainer that's lined with coffee filters and drain it, because I like my yogurt thick, and that's what makes it Greek yogurt. So there's 1 minute. And you don't have to strain it if you don't mind your yogurt a little thinner, but as I said, I like mine thick. And I've got to look up some recipes, because you'll get quite a bit of whey drained out of this, and I've got to look up some recipes, see what I can use that for. But I'll probably show you tomorrow some of the finished results in a different one. Thanks for watching. So it's incubated for 8 hours. I just pulled the liner out of the pot. And just to show you, I don't know if you can see, it's a little bit of a jiggle. But it's pretty thick. But it's still quite warm. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cover it with some plastic wrap. I'll put it in the fridge to chill overnight, and then tomorrow we'll work on straining it. Now you can eat it just as it is without straining it. It'll be a little thinner, but I like my yogurt thick, so I'm going to strain it. So here's my yogurt after sitting overnight. You'll notice it's pretty thick, but believe me, as I found out with my other batch, there's a lot of whey underneath there. So I'm going to strain it. I'll have to do it in batches. I don't have a big enough strainer for all of it. I've got my strainer, and I've got 2 layers of cheesecloth in it, and I've got it into a big pot. And I'll just scoop some into there and let it drain a couple hours in the fridge, and we'll work in batches to get it out of there, and that'll help thicken it up a little bit and get some of that whey down underneath. I still haven't looked to find recipes for the whey, but I'll find something to do with it. So you'll see I got most of the yogurt into the strainer. It was really thick on top, but it's a lot thinner down underneath, so it really does need to be strained, and hopefully you can see that. I've got the sun reflecting on it. But that's going to go in the fridge to drain, and I'll check it every once in a while just to make sure my pot's not getting too full. But I'll let it sit at least 2 hours, probably closer to 3, to make sure that it's drained, because that's a lot of yogurt in there. And you can use this yogurt for your next batch. Save a couple of tablespoons, and it'll work for your if you want to make another batch. As I said, if you really like the yogurt and you want to try this, send me a message. I'll send you a link to This Old Gal's website where I got the recipe for this. It's great yogurt. It's very tasty. And just don't use ultra pasteurized milk. You can use pasteurized, but not the ultra. It doesn't work as well. And raw milk is even preferable if you can find it. I've been trying to find some local, but I haven't been able to find anybody that has it. But we'll keep looking. Anyway, this worked well, and we'll let it drip, and we'll check back, and I'll show you hopefully the final product. So I'm going to use some of my undrained yogurt this morning to make my smoothie. I just won't have to thin it down much. I've got probably a half cup of yogurt in my bowl. I'm going to add maybe a tablespoon of chia seeds. I've got a mushy old banana I'm going to throw in there, and then I'll throw in a few raspberries and some blueberries, and probably a little bit of honey. And we'll blenderize that up, and I'll show you. So I've got my yogurt, my chia seeds, my dead ripe banana, about 2 handfuls of raspberries, 2 handfuls of blueberries, and I'm gonna blend it all up with my stick blender, and we'll see. I'll taste it. I like mine smoothie just a little bit sweeter, so I'll either add the honey or some raw sugar and we'll see what it needs from there. You don't have to add anything. This is going to make enough for me for 2 days. I'll have a glass today, and then I'll put the other in a container and stick it in the fridge and have it tomorrow. We'll see how thick it is. I may need to add a little milk to thin it down here. It's going to get a little noisy, and I need to use my other hand. So we're going to turn you off a minute. In the sink here because the blueberries and raspberries wanted to fly everywhere, but just mix it up. You can do this in a regular blender, but my stick blender usually works well when I have 2 hands. I don't know if you can see how thick this is. It's really thick. I'm going to have to thin it down. I thought maybe because the yogurt was a little thinner I wouldn't have to, but the berries really, frozen berries really thicken it up. So I'm going to have to add a little milk to thin it. So I added probably a 1/4 cup, maybe just a little bit more than that, to thin it down. Depends on how thick you like your smoothies. I don't mind mine a little thick. I think I'm going to thin it just a little bit more though. Blenderize it up. And that's going to be breakfast. And that's very tasty and it's good for you. Just one way to use your yogurt. I also oftentimes use yogurt in place of sour cream. In some recipes it works just as well. But otherwise it's just plain tasty and it's good for you. So this has been draining for about 4 hours, and you can see how nice and thick it's gotten. And it could actually drain a little bit longer, but it's thick enough for me. It's really thick around the edges. So I'm going to put this in my storage container. I've got about 2 cups of whey out of this, and then I'll put the rest of the yogurt in to drain. Mighty tasty. I did look up some recipes online to see what to do with the whey. They recommend using it in place of your liquids and breads and like pancakes and waffles and biscuits and stuff like that. They said you can add it to your smoothies, and there's other stuff you can make with it. They say you can make ricotta cheese with it and all kinds of stuff, so I may look into that. They also say that all the animals like it. You can feed it to the chickens, which I'm probably going to give some of it to the chickens. It'll keep a long time in the fridge, so probably by the time I run out of this I'll have more from another batch, because I eat yogurt fairly regularly. But that's what it looks like. And it's not quite as tangy as some of your store-bought yogurts, but that's fine with me. It's very good tasting. I hope you give it a try. Thanks for watching.